They say funerals reveal the truth. Not because dead men speak, but because the living finally stop whispering. By the morning of Jet Cole's state funeral, all of Ghana already knew the story had changed. The first version had been sweet enough for the public to swallow. A hidden woman, 5 children, a silent sacrifice, a second home by the sea, a grieving younger wife, pushed aside by a rich woman from London. But truth is a dangerous thing. It does not arrive all at once. It arrives in layers. First, the court said Iris was the only lawful widow. Then the DNA results cut through the rest like a blade. 2 boys belonged to Jet. The other 3 children did not. And the man hiding behind the shadow house, behind the money, behind the silence, behind the legal confusion, was not some stranger. It was Dex Mensa, Jet's manager, Jet's fixer and Jet's friend. That was the part that turned the story from scandal into disgrace. Because now Zuri was not just the hidden woman. She was the woman who let a dying man believe another man's children were his. And Ghana does not forgive that easily. Black Star Square had been transformed before sunrise. Red and black mourning cloth moved in the wind like warning flags. Soldiers stood in formation near the entrance. State officials, musicians, ministers, chiefs, journalists, and invited mourners filled the space with controlled tension. This was no longer a family funeral. This was a public judgment dressed as a burial. The large screen at the front of the square showed Jet Cole's face in a gold-framed tribute. His smile was easy, famous, and immortal. But below that smiling face, the seating arrangement told the real story. And seating matters at a funeral. More than speeches, more than flowers, more than tears. Because where they place you tells the world who you were to the dead. In the front row, under the main VIP canopy, 1 seat stood at the center. Reserved for the widow Mrs. Cole. Not first wife. Lawful widow. That wording had not come from tradition. It had come from law. And law has a colder voice than family. By the time Iris arrived, the cameras were already waiting. She stepped out of the black government vehicle in hand-woven mourning cloth so elegant it looked like armor. Her face was calm. Her posture was straight. Her eyes were hidden behind dark glasses. But there was no weakness in the way she moved. Not one. As she walked forward, the military officer at the gate stepped aside and saluted. The family elders rose. The ministers nodded. Even the chiefs shifted slightly in their seats. Because by that morning, Iris was not just the woman who had been betrayed. She was the woman the court had recognized. The woman the state had acknowledged. The woman the family had finally closed ranks around. Auntie Munsa met her halfway and took her hand. "Come," she said softly. "Your place is in front." Not one person objected. That was Iris's coronation. Not loud, not flashy, not dramatic, just visible. She was not arriving as a guest. She was arriving as the widow. Zuri arrived 20 minutes later, and that was when the air changed. Not because people were shocked to see her. They had expected her. But expectation is not the same as acceptance. She stepped out of Dex's old black SUV, now being driven by a hired man, and looked toward the funeral grounds with the expression of someone still clinging to a script that had already been burned. She wore black lace again. Too much lace, too much ambition, too much memory of the role she had once hoped to play. The 3 younger children were with her, and the 2 boys walked close as well, dressed carefully, their little faces serious and confused. At first, she looked toward the front row. Of course she did. That was where she had imagined herself sitting. That was the picture she had built in her mind from the moment Jet died in her bed. Then an usher approached her, respectful, neutral and trained. "Madam," he said, "your section is this way." He pointed past the front, past the family, past the legal delegates, past the siblings, past the chiefs, to a lower side row marked, "Mother of the kids." The words hit her harder than a slap. Not a widow, not wife, but guest. Guest? She stared at the sign as if looking at a personal insult written by God himself. "There must be a mistake," she said quietly. The usher did not argue. He simply held out the card. "Your name is here," She took it, and there it was in black ink. That was the moment the public humiliation became real. Because cameras caught it. People saw it. The whispers started before she even sat down. That's her. They didn't seat her in front? So the court story was true? She's not the widow? Then who are the other children for? One of the little boys tugged at her cloth. Mama, why are we sitting here? Zuri looked at the front row, where Iris now sat between Jet's sister and the state representative. The answer rose in her throat like acid. Because in that single arrangement, the whole country could see what the court had already decided. One woman had a hidden house. The other was married legally. And at this funeral, the legally married wife was the only widow. Then came the next humiliation. Uncle Ebenezer arrived at the outer barricade in a hired taxi. No walking into the square like a king. Just an old man stepping out too quickly, clutching a walking stick and the remains of his authority. He moved toward the entrance with the stubborn confidence of someone who still believed a title could open a locked gate. I am the head of the family, he shouted at state security. This is my nephew's funeral. The officer checked a printed list, then checked again, then looked up. Your name is on the restricted list, sir. Ebenezer stiffened. What nonsense is this? The officer's tone did not change. This is a state function under legal oversight. You are not cleared for entry to the family section. Ebenezer's mouth fell open. I am family. The officer nodded once. And the legal widow has objected to your participation in official rights pending review of your misconduct in the succession dispute. The words were clinical, cold and perfect. People had already started recording. A few recognized him and stepped closer. The old man who had announced wives on national radio, the same man who tried to install a second widow before the body was buried, now shut out of the funeral gates like a stray man with old stories and no invitation. Ebenezer raised his stick. I led this family, but the gates did not open. A younger policeman leaned closer. Sir, please step back. That was the last public blow. The great family head, the man who sold tradition for a hotel cut, was forced to stand outside his nephew's funeral and watch the large memorial screens from the public crowd. Not inside, outside, with strangers. That image traveled fast online. And once it did, whatever respect he had left bled out into the street. Dex Mensa was not there. An absence at a funeral can be louder than weeping. By mid-morning, people had begun asking the same question. Where is the manager? Where is the man who handled the money? The man who managed the house? The man whose name now sat beside 3 DNA results like a stain that would not wash out? The answer had come just a day before the funeral. A national radio station interrupted its funeral arrangements with breaking news. Authorities confirm financial irregularities linked to the late Jet Cole's estate. Police are seeking Mr. Dex Mensa for questioning in relation to fraud, concealment of estate assets, and misrepresentation tied to paternity claims. Then came the second blow. A photo, splashed across phones, blogs, and news scrolls. Dex at a border checkpoint from security footage. Baseball cap. Doffelbag. Head down. Running. The public reaction was immediate. He had not just vanished. He had fled. That mattered. Because escape does not look powerful when the whole nation watches you do it with your collar turned up like a thief. The whispers became laughter, then contempt. Look at the great manager now. He ran. He let the woman face everything alone? He stole the money and still ran? So this was never love. It was business. That was Dex's final stain. Not a dramatic arrest. Something worse. Exposure. He did not leave looking dangerous. He left looking guilty. And guilty men do not keep their myths for long. Then the military procession began. The drums slowed. Everybody rose. The casket, draped in the national flag, moved through the center aisle under full state honor. As it passed the front row, Iris stood. The camera cut to her face. No tears. No trembling. Only grief that had been forced to learn discipline. 3 rows behind her, Zuri also rose. But no camera stayed there long. That was another humiliation, because she had once wanted to arrive at the funeral like a revelation. Instead, she was being edited out of history in real time. One of the younger children began to fuss in the heat. Another asked for water. Zuri turned to calm them, and in that small, ordinary struggle, the last illusion slipped. She did not look like a widow. She looked like a woman losing the role she had rehearsed too hard. When the casket reached the center platform, the officiating minister called for the widow to approach. There was no hesitation. No argument. No confusión. The usher walked straight to Iris. Mrs. Cole. Iris stepped forward alone. That was the public coronation. Broadcast live. In front of the state, the church, the chiefs, the family, and the entire country. The minister placed the ceremonial cloth in her hands. The lawful widow may proceed. That phrase rolled across the square through the microphone. And somewhere behind the guest rows, Zuri closed her eyes. Because some defeats do not scream. They settle into the bones. After the service, one reporter caught Zuri near the exit. "Do you have anything to say?" This was her final chance. The last doorway through which sympathy might still enter. She could have said nothing. She could have protected what little dignity remained. Instead, desperation spoke. "I took care of him when nobody else did," she said. "I stayed when everyone abandoned him. It might have worked once, but not now." Because before the clip could even spread, Auntie Munsa gave her own statement outside the VIP gate. "My brother made mistakes. We are not hiding that. But care is not marriage. Lies are not rights. And no child should ever be used to negotiate a man's legacy." That statement buried Zuri more deeply than any insult could have. Because it sounded fair. And truth, when spoken calmly, is almost impossible to beat. Online, the public turned. The comments changed. They were no longer asking whether Iris had been cruel. They were asking why Zuri had lied for so long. Why she claimed a widow's seat. Why did she let the younger children stand under a dead man's name? Why she sold pain like innocence. Her plan had not worked in her favor. In fact, it had done the opposite. The sympathy she begged from the public became the evidence of her fall. At the private burial that followed, there was no second widow mat. Only the lawful widow, the siblings, the two confirmed boys, and the family. Iris stood at the grave with Kofi and Kojo beside her. Not because she had forgotten what brought them there, but because children do not write the lies adults build around them. When the final soil touched the coffin, the wind rose once across the cemetery. Jet Cole was finally buried, not as a king of two homes, just as a man whose secrets outlived him long enough to shame the living. After the burial, the High Life Grand Hotel reopened under legal supervision. The two boys were placed under trust protection. The younger three disappeared from headlines almost immediately, because that is what the public does when a scandal stops entertaining it. Uncle Ebenezer returned to his own house carrying a silence no elder should ever have to wear. Zuri left Accra in a hired van with her mother and the children, to the hard road back to ordinary life. And Dex? Still gone. That was what kept the ending from feeling peaceful. Because somewhere in another country with another phone, another shirt, and another name maybe, Dex Mensa was still breathing. Still carrying whatever money he had managed to move. Still alive enough to know he had helped burn down a family and escape before the smoke settled. And that is the kind of ending that stays under the skin. Because justice was served. But not fully. Not yet. Jet Cole lied that he sent the maid to school abroad. She arrived at his funeral with his kids. But by the time the coffin touched the earth, the law had spoken, the blood had answered, and the nation had watched the lie break open in public. The legal wife kept the name. The family kept the dignity. The children kept the truth. And the woman who wanted to enter history as a widow left it as a warning. Because you can build a secret house. You can bribe an elder. You can buy cloth, interviews, and even silence. But when the grave opens, the truth always wants a seat. And if it cannot sit inside the funeral, it will stand at the gate and stop the whole thing. Was inviting Zuri as a guest/mother a sign of Iris's mercy? Or was it the ultimate public humiliation? Did the head of the family deserve to be barred from the funeral? Or is it a sin to keep a family head away from his nephew's grave? Thank you for riding with us through the lies, the law, and the legacy. Kindly subscribe for more stories.